This unsettling story took place about a year ago when I was just a kid, around 10 or 11 years old. I remember it vividly because it's something that still creeps me out to this day. My sister, Ava, who was 19 at the time, and I decided to visit a local superstore. We didn't have a specific shopping list, just the usual urge to grab some snacks and explore the aisles. As we wandered through the store, joking and chatting about everything and nothing, we eventually found ourselves in the self-checkout line. That's when I noticed him, a tall, looming figure in his mid-40s, with dark hair that fell messily over his forehead. His presence was almost magnetic, but in a horrifying way. Beside him stood a young boy, maybe 9 or 10, who seemed completely unfazed by the strange energy radiating from the man. At first, I tried to ignore them, focusing instead on the mundane task of scanning our items. But just as my sister and I started to bicker about something trivial, I heard the man's voice break through our conversation. "Don't be so mean to me," he said, his tone laced with an unsettling playfulness. He then leaned closer to Ava and remarked, "You're adorable." My stomach churned at his words. We exchanged horrified glances, trying to process what had just happened. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary interaction. The boy next to him smiled, a grin that sent chills racing down my spine. It was as if he found amusement in our discomfort. In that moment, a thick silence enveloped us. I could feel my heart pounding, and the air around us felt suffocating. With a collective instinct, we hurriedly finished checking out and rushed out of the store, feeling the man's eyes on us the entire time. Once we were safely inside Ava's Jeep, we couldn't stop talking about the encounter. "What was wrong with that guy?" Ava asked, her voice shaky. I was still trying to wrap my mind around it. The way he had spoken to her felt wrong, so wrong that it made my skin crawl. When we got home, we excitedly recounted the story to our parents, but they brushed it off as just a creep being inappropriate. "Just ignore people like that," they said. But deep down, I couldn't shake the nagging question, why had he singled out my sister without any regard for her age? Ava had always looked younger than she was, and in that moment, she could have easily passed for a teenager. Weeks passed, and the incident faded from our daily conversations, but it lingered in the back of my mind. I would sometimes have nightmares about the man, his unsettling laughter echoing through my dreams. What if he was lurking nearby, watching us from the shadows? One evening, while I was home alone, I heard a soft knock at the door. My heart raced as I glanced out the peephole. I couldn't see anyone, but a sickening feeling washed over me. Had it been him? I waited in silence, praying it was just my imagination. The knocking grew louder, more insistent, and I felt paralyzed with fear. Finally, I mustered the courage to call my sister, who was out with friends. "Ava, someone's at the door," I whispered, panic rising in my chest. "What should I do?" "Just stay quiet and lock all the doors." "I'm on my way," she replied, her voice filled with concern. As I crouched down, hiding from the ominous knock, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, lurking just out of sight. My heart raced until I heard Ava's familiar voice calling my name, pulling me back from the brink of terror. She burst through the door, and the tension in the air dissipated slightly, but the fear lingered. Even now, I can't help but think about that man and how easily things could have escalated. The world can be unpredictable, and not everyone has good intentions. So, if you ever find yourself in a seemingly harmless situation that suddenly feels off, trust your instincts. Always be aware of your surroundings, because you never know who or what might be lurking in the shadows. Stay safe out there. It was the week before Halloween, and the local Walmart was buzzing with preparations. The shelves were packed with plastic pumpkins, ghost decorations, fake cobwebs, and all sorts of spooky items that were meant to get people in the mood for the holiday. My roommates, Sophie and Kayla, and I had decided to head there late one evening to pick up some last-minute decorations for the party we were throwing that weekend. We weren't expecting anything unusual. After all, it was just Walmart. But the moment we stepped into the store, something felt off. The place was almost empty, save for a few shoppers and some employees stocking the shelves in the distance. It was quiet, too quiet, and the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed louder than usual, casting harsh shadows that made the aisles look longer and darker. As we made our way to the Halloween section in aisle 13, I noticed something strange. Among the usual decorations and mannequins dressed up in cheap Halloween costumes, there was one mannequin that stood out. It was taller than the others, dressed in a black, tattered cloak with its face hidden under a deep hood. But what unsettled me was the way it was positioned, standing at the very end of the aisle, facing directly toward us, almost like it was watching. "I don't like that one," I muttered, nudging Sophie as I pointed at the mannequin. She shrugged, laughing it off. "It's just a decoration. You're letting the Halloween vibes get to you." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The more I stared at the mannequin, the more real it looked. Its hands, which should have been plastic, seemed too detailed. And even though I couldn't see its face beneath the hood, I had the disturbing sense that it was staring right at me. We started picking out decorations, trying to ignore the creepy mannequin, but every now and then, I would glance back at it, and each time I did, I swore it had moved slightly. Its posture seemed to shift, as if it was leaning in closer, its head tilting ever so slightly toward us. I told myself it was just my imagination, that it was all part of the Halloween atmosphere, but the unease gnawed at me. Then Kayla gasped. "Did you guys see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Sophie and I turned to look at her, then back at the mannequin. At first, it looked the same, standing there, still and silent. But then I saw what Kayla meant. The mannequin had moved. Its arms, which had been hanging at its sides, were now slightly raised, as if reaching toward us. "What the hell?" I muttered, taking a step back. We all stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. The air around us felt thick, almost suffocating, and the buzzing of the fluorescent lights seemed to grow louder. My heart pounded in my chest as we backed away from the mannequin, inching toward the end of the aisle. But as we turned the corner to leave, I glanced back one last time, and the mannequin was gone. I stopped dead in my tracks, my blood running cold. "Where did it go?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Sophie and Kayla looked back as well, their faces pale with fear. The mannequin, which had been standing just a few feet away from us, had vanished without a trace. There was no way someone had moved it that quickly. It was like it had disappeared into thin air. We didn't wait around to find out what had happened. We bolted for the front of the store, our footsteps echoing in the eerily quiet aisles. As we rushed past the shelves, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us, following us, even though there was no one else in sight. When we finally made it outside, we jumped into the car, locking the doors behind us. None of us spoke for a while, the reality of what had just happened sinking in. It wasn't until later, when we were back at the apartment, that we started to talk about it, trying to rationalize what we'd seen. But no matter how much we tried to explain it away, the image of that mannequin, standing there, watching us, moving on its own, haunted me. It was around 1 a.m. when my phone buzzed. I had received a notification from my security camera app, telling me there was movement detected in my apartment. The weird part was, I wasn't home. I had gone out for some late-night grocery shopping at Walmart, my usual weekly routine to avoid the daytime crowds. I opened the app, watching the live feed from the camera I had set up in my living room. At first, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just the usual view of my couch, TV, and coffee table. But then I saw it. A shadow moved across the room. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at the screen. There was someone in my apartment. The shadow moved again, this time closer to the camera, but I couldn't make out any details. Just a dark figure, slowly creeping through my home. Panicked, I called the police and told them what was happening. They assured me that they were sending someone over, but it would take a few minutes. My hands shook as I hung up the phone and tried to calm myself down. I was miles away from home, standing in the cereal aisle of Walmart, and there was nothing I could do but wait. As I stood there, trying to keep my breathing steady, I felt it. Someone was watching me. I glanced around, but the store was mostly empty. A few late-night shoppers wandered the aisles, but no one seemed out of place. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me, watching my every move. I decided to leave. Whatever groceries I had planned to buy could wait. I just needed to get out of there. But as I turned to leave, I saw him. A man, standing at the end of the aisle, partially obscured by the shelves. He was wearing a long coat, his hood pulled low over his face. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel his gaze boring into me, following me as I moved. I quickly turned down another aisle, trying to put as much distance between us as possible. But no matter where I went, I could feel him. Every time I looked over my shoulder, I saw him, just a few steps behind, never getting closer, but never falling too far behind. My heart raced as I ducked into the bathroom section, hoping to lose him in the maze of towels and shower curtains. But when I glanced back, he was still there, standing at the end of the aisle, watching me. I grabbed my phone and opened the security camera app again, desperate for some kind of distraction. But what I saw made my blood run cold. The shadow in my apartment had moved closer to the camera, and this time I could see it clearly. It wasn't just a shadow, it was the same man who was following me in Walmart. The same long coat, the same hood pulled low over his face. He was standing in my living room, staring directly into the camera, as if he knew I was watching him. My breath caught in my throat as I stumbled backward, nearly knocking over a display of towels. I had to get out of there. Now. I sprinted toward the front of the store, my footsteps echoing in the empty aisles. I didn't care who saw me or what they thought. I just needed to get away from him. As I reached the exit, I glanced back one last time. The man was gone. But I knew he wasn't really gone. He was waiting, watching. Whether in my apartment or in the aisles of Walmart, I couldn't escape him. And even now, as I sit here writing this, I can feel his eyes on me. I don't know who he is or what he wants, but one thing is clear. He's not just a man. He's something else.